am Kathy Abbott on the board of the League of Women Voters of the Morristown area, as I was introduced. And I'd like to introduce our two speakers about the Drew Forest, from the Friends of the Drew Forest. And to my right is Kirsten Wallenstein, a member of the Environmental Commission, Climate Action Committee, and liaison to the Open Space Committee in Madison. In addition to serving on the Friends of the Drew Forest, she is also the board president of Sprout House, an innovative nature-based preschool. Kirsten brings marketing expertise from her 20-year career in global financial services to promote environmental and other social sector organizations. She earned her BA from Smith College and MBA from the Darden School, which is the University of Virginia. Judy Kroll has served on the Madison Zoning Board of Adjustment as a trustee to the Great Swamp Watershed Association and as a trustee to the Great Swamp Watershed Association. In 2001, she co-founded Madison Matters, a 400-member land use advocacy group that worked for conformance and improvement of Madison's land use ordinances. Her environmental advocacy dates back to her arrival in New Jersey in 1995, when she organized neighbors to successfully oppose development of a large assisted living facility on an historic property adjacent to her home. Working with mentors that included the late Helen Fensky, the activist behind the preservation of the Great Swamp, Judy learned the value of preserving open spaces, the strategies to educate the public, and productive ways to engage with local decision makers. And now, I hand it over to Kirsten.
Okay, welcome. So today's discussion is called Fertile Soil, How a Forest Conservation Group Revealed Deep Community Roots. So we're going to talk first about the forest and its roots, but we're also going to talk about how it really brought together a diverse group of people and created this amazing community and helped us push our advocacy forward. So, okay. So the Drew Forest is 53 acres of mature, intact natural forest. It's one of the most biodiverse forests in the region. And I can honestly say I went on my first fungus foray recently, which was amazing, learning about all the fungi under the forest and seeing all these things I'd never seen before. So. It is critical groundwater recharge, which is essential to the region. Many towns get water from this, and Madison gets all of its water from the Berry Valley Aquifer. It's also important to climate change for multiple reasons, carbon sequestration and otherwise. And it has some of the oldest trees in Morris County, so some really gorgeous trees and tree canopy. And jump in if anyone has questions as I go. As I see this map and say, oh boy, how am I going to? Judy, you jump in if I.
So the top road that you see is Madison Avenue, and to the right would be downtown Madison, and then to the left and further up would be Morris Township and Morristown. So that's the orientation, that's the Drew campus that sits in front right on Madison Avenue.
Right, so I don't know how many people have visited the Drew Forest. So if you haven't, it's open to the public, and the best way is to come in off of Madison Avenue up to the parking. There's actually a parking way up there that I can't reach, and then you walk through here. And there is two entrances, one to the Arboretum, where you'll see lovely native plants and things that you can't find elsewhere. And then on this side is Hepburn Woods. And there's also trails from there. So, yes.
I think the only way I ever got in was from Guanica Way. I think I had to duck under some things.
Oh, yes. You can come in from this way. Yeah, but there's probably less fencing from the other way. So that's, yeah, generally the forest. And this part is fenced with deer fencing, which helps to maintain the understory of the forest, we'll talk about later. And then this is just other areas. I don't know if there's anything else I should point out.
Steep slopes and the brownish colors, those are caused by glacial activity. And carved out these deep dells, and they're very unique from a geology standpoint.
So which is the area that the university was contemplating selling? What's the area under contention right now?
Well, I mean, we don't know, but
Oh,
we
okay.
just assume all of the forest is at risk. You know, our mission, besides keeping my slideshow going, is just to do what we can to preserve it. Trying to get funding from public sources.
Kristen, is the little yellow dotted lines also part of the 53 acres?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there there's not trails in that area, are there?
I think you can walk around in there.
There are some trails through those areas. The dotted areas have not been fenced, but all of it is open to the public, and there are some trails through those areas. They're not really as obvious and well marked, but there are some trails in there as well.
So we talked about a little bit about the Berry Valley Aquifer, which is, you know, very important regionally. It's kind of hard to see, but you know, many towns, 31 towns, get some of their water from the aquifer. So the water is literally being filtered, you know, through the trees, you know, into our ground and into the aquifer, obviously from many places, but the Drew Forest happens to be one of the critical recharge areas. So another reason we need to preserve it. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the reforestation and how it came to be. So before the reforestation, it was just open woods, not fenced, empty understory, so not a lot of wildflowers, native species, things, just kind of, you know, some nice trees, a lot of trees, beautiful trees, but there were a lot of invasive plants, and, you know, not a lot of diversity. You know, with development and everything, the diversity decline had been very steep. So, under the leadership of Sarah Webb and some others at the university, Chris Hepburn, some other person, they started a project to restore the forest and to make it functional again as a true intact old growth forest. The goals were to support pollinators and to create an educational classroom. So a lot of students at Drew go there for various classes, and many people, in fact, a lot of folks on our board and on our in our groups are alumni from Drew that were inspired through these projects and are now doing their own advocacy for environmentalism or work in the field. So it's really amazing to see that. So the biggest challenges were protecting the forest from deer and getting rid of invasive plants. For anyone who's ever tried to do that, you know how challenging it can be. And then restoring the native trees and plants. So here are the results. So here's the deer fencing that goes up around. And you could see just the beauty and all of the plants that came back. And if you visit in the spring, especially when you go into the Zuck Arboretum, you can see many of these plants, and they're all labeled, so you can get inspired for what you want to do at your home and create your mini Drew forest.
Excuse me, what was the time frame for the renewal? When did they start in?
2008.
Yeah.
2008 it started.
Okay.
2008. they won awards for it, they had support from Fish and Wildlife, and I feel like another organization.
Garden Club of America, U.S. Wildlife, University was obviously a big partner in it. And a lot of volunteers, and a lot of student volunteers. So people from the community, but also a lot of students volunteered their time to literally go in and pull out, these invasive plants, and plant native trees and shrubs into place. On the bottom right there, that's a little grouping of little seedlings from a beech tree. And prior to the deer fencing, those would have been decimated by deer. So what was happening was, you had these tall trees in the forest, but the baby trees, the next generation wasn't coming up because they were being eaten. So now the forest is functional and it's regenerating, and it's a really wonderful result.
So in terms of what was included, you can see that there were quite a few plants. It was quite a lot of work. Over 2,000 tree seedlings, 750 shrubs, and then other plants. So a lot of work. And not everything has survived, but you can definitely see just an amazing understory of what Judy was talking about with, just, plants. So a little more, because we just get so into our pictures. But it's just amazing to see and to get inspired by some of these flowers, and then to bring them into your own yard, and it's also for the pollinators. They're there, they're also can be protected. For example, right now everyone's blowing their leaves, but in the forest, the leaf layers are there protecting the pollinators so that they can nest for the winter. So, this is one of the amazing benefits of this place. And as Judy mentioned, student volunteers working, they're learning, they're pulling invasives, and then they're going on to do things in the environment. And they also, it's a great place just to take refuge and take a break from your studies, or if you're in the community, just for mental health. I'm sure everyone's read about forest bathing and how, they've done studies that your blood pressure lowers when you go in the forest, and mine does. So beyond all the flowers that we just showed you, we talked about the aquifer, which is valued as an ecoservice at $1.5 million annually, and also that the forest provides a critical carbon sequestration and the biodiversity hotspot. 150 bird species, 14 mammals, turtles, toads, frogs, name it. I mean, I went there when they had the toad hatching, which is like these miniature, it's one of the biggest populations of toads. And I was out there, I couldn't even see them at first, I had to put my reading glasses on. But it was incredible, it's like this reconnection with nature. So lots of biodiversity that you just can't get in the suburban yard. And then we talked about the living laboratory and the peaceful display. And here's some pictures. I want to read out. There's the baby toad.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a little toad on a finger, and hawk. I'm not going to guess what an duck that is. Maybe someone in the audience.
I think it's a wood duck.
Wood duck. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is an unknown fungi that I discovered. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it off to Judy to talk about the group. Let's start. Oh. Okay, great. If you want, I can just, if you want to stand.
Well, that's okay. That's one of my. Okay,
So, when we were asked to present tonight, one of the things that, we were asked about was our group and how we formed and what was our, sort of secret to success. And that was really interesting for us to think about because we've been so busy since we started in 2021 that we just never really stopped and thought about, well, what's in the secret sauce? So it was an interesting thing for us to think about. So when we learned that Drew University was interested in selling its property, Chris Hepburn, who was the person that donated the deer fencing, contacted a couple of people and we decided to have just a sort of a brainstorming session on Zoom. And this was back in May 21. So we had this first meeting and then we said, well, let's have another meeting next week. We each went off with 1 or 2 assignments and came back. And we've actually never stopped that. We have continued to have weekly meetings every Thursday morning. We now have about 19 people in our steering committee. And that just kind of grew and developed in a sort of an organic kind of way. One of the first things we did was develop a mission statement because we wanted to focus and make sure that we had, and we could all talk about what our mission was. So our mission is to, the Drew Forest Preserve will be permanently protected as open space through a conservation sale that will strengthen Drew University and its financial future. So like many small liberal arts colleges, Drew is seeking to enhance its financial status and it's, again, like many colleges, it's struggling. So that's why they came up with the idea of selling some of these lands. And so what we want to do is see that it's sold as a conservation sale, using mostly public money, and then so the university receives money for the forest, but the forest becomes preserved. We were inspired by what we call the conservation success story next door. If you're familiar with Giralda Farms, most people know where that complex is, and most of us have walked around that bikeway that goes around it. And if you've been around for a number of years, you know that it used to be impossible to go inside Giralda Farms because it was, it was a private corporate park. But Chatham Township actually purchased through county open space money and other private and public donations an area that's inside it's this loop trail here that goes up and around the public performance space, and there's a pond included. That area was developable. It could have been commercial office space, and instead the owners decided to sell it to, and now it's part of the Morris County Park System. So it was sort of an addition to the Lewanika Brook Reservation System. And that was done with county and state open trust funds. So if you live in Morris County and you own property, you pay into a county open space fund. And that money is used for municipalities to apply for open space grants. So our vision was that the Drew Forest could potentially be saved in the same manner. So we are an all-volunteer 501c3. We have an elected board and officers. Kirsten mentioned that our group is made up of conservation volunteers, some municipal environmental leaders from Madison, such as Kirsten, who's on the Environmental Commission, and several other climate-oriented teams within Madison. We also have Drew students and alums. And I think one of the things that's made us successful is a diverse skill set. We have people who have financial analysis skills, marketing skills, writing skills, social media, and Sarah Webb, who is the environmental scientist who started the restoration, is also in our group. So she's taught us all an unbelievable amount of stuff that I just never dreamed was going on out there in forest. So that's who we are, and we've been, as I said, started in May of 2021. So one of the things as I thought about talking about what made us successful was kind of we have some, what I would call our guiding principles. We didn't really do this formally, but it sort of occurred to me that this is really kind of what we've been thinking about and how we've been behaving. The first thing we wanted to focus on are win-win solutions, one in which the forest is saved, but Drew University receives financial assistance that it seeks and that it would like to see. So that's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the public, it's a win for the forest, it's a win for the university. We've always focused on advocating and educating about the forest itself. We wanted to give the forest a voice. And I think that is probably where our mission has kept us really razor focused on giving the forest a voice. We've outreached to every constituency and every stakeholder. We've talked to the university president. We've talked to several of their trustees. We have obviously talked to our own elected representatives in Madison. We've talked with other Morris County municipalities and received support from them. The county commissioners, AKA freeholders, they are going to be deciding in just within the next few weeks about the $10 million grant that has been applied for from the Open Space Fund. So we've talked to them. State legislatures, federal representatives, we've been in touch with Representative Mikey Sherrill and Senator Cory Booker. So it's been really kind of reaching out and staying positive with all of these different stakeholders. And we've done some really grassroots kinds of things. We have a really robust website that was developed by a Drew alum, and we have a newsletter with almost 2,000 subscribers. We have social media, Facebook, Instagram, and we've done a lot of talking to people at local events, farmers markets, Fish Whack, all kinds of different events that we've been invited to, and Great Swamp Watershed Association hosted us at their music festival. So we've had kind of a real outreach wherever we thought we should go and talk to people. We've been welcome to do so. We also were consistently attending and commenting at our own borough council meetings, and we've just become kind of a fixture there. We've done some fun things during the holidays. We actually sang the 12 Days of the Drew Forest for them one year, and they loved it so much they invited us to come back, so we had to come up with another song last year. But we thought it was important to keep the forest on everyone's mind, and sometimes those meetings will be long and they may not get to the public comment period until 10 or 11 at night. But we always thought it was important for us to have something to say about the forest, or we invited other volunteers or alums or Drew students to speak. So that was really important for us to do. And then I give Kirsten a lot of credit for the branding that we've done, which was, she got us to kind of have a consistent logo, the blue lawn signs. I'm sure many of you have seen those around town. And when somebody suggested in one of our calls we should do lawn signs, I was like, well, I cannot tell you how successful those lawn signs have been, because people saw them driving around town, and they would then come up to us at our tabling event and say, oh yeah, I saw your sign, what's that all about? So it generated so many conversations for us that the lawn signs ended up, I have no idea how to fix it. Oh, there we go.
If it stays, yeah.
Anyway, so things like that, and I'll get to this a little bit more later about the different ideas and the diverse perspectives of our steering committee. Those are the kinds of things that, really are helpful, and you don't always know they're going to be helpful. So it's just great to work through with such a great team. So branding, we have T-shirts, we have lawn signs, we have We have the maps that you saw earlier at all of our tabling events. It's really created a situation where now people come up to us and instead of saying, well, what's the Drew Forest all about? They say, what's going on? Give me the latest update. Like I signed a petition, did this, I did this. What's the latest? So we know we're having a great deal of effect on people in terms of helping them to stay up to speed on what's going on. We've also done a lot of stuff in the community. We went out to some of the local restaurants and stores in Madison and asked them to put our signs up and support us. The top picture there is a community event we held in June of 21. I'm trying to remember when we did that. Yeah, it wasn't this, maybe it was June of 22, where we rented the Madison Arts Center, and we just invited the whole community to come, and we did a presentation about the forest and about carbon and about aquifer, and really help people understand why it was so important. And then the bottom center photo is from a holiday parade where we had one of our volunteers created a float, and he just put this gigantic QR code up, and we took the float around, and people were just snapping and getting directly into our website in the moment, which was really fun and exciting, and that was a lot of fun. So we tried to do some fun things along the way as well. Press coverage, we have somebody in our group who does a tremendous job, Claire Wickham, keeping the press informed, and make sure that they're alerted to any meetings that we have. She does press releases for us, and she has really done a fabulous job of getting local coverage for us and always finding unique different angles of things that we can use to get the press's attention. So, success factors. I think for us, it all starts with a really deep love for the forest. We all just really are passionate about that, and I think that's a really important aspect of any organization, and keeping people motivated is you have to really believe in what you're doing, because sometimes it's tough, and conservation takes a long time. So perseverance is really, greatly enhanced by a true love of what you're working for. We always try to keep everything positive. We've respected all parties, both within our own organization and externally. I mentioned the weekly update meetings. Those have become really important. We do a lot of brainstorming. We get ideas like lawn signs, which I would have been like, I don't know about that, but that ended up being fabulously important and successful for us. So those are really important for us to talk to each other and get ideas and really have a good group interaction. I talked about the diverse knowledge, diverse experiences, high degree of accountability. If I say I'm going to do something, I better do it, or if I can't do it, I better say I need somebody to help me with it, because it's going to, next week when that Thursday call comes, I better have done something about that. And also just being really able to pivot. There's been some curveballs that we've had thrown at us, and we had to sort of do things quickly, and maybe we might think we're in a lull, and suddenly we're not in a lull anymore. So being able to really move and be agile is extremely helpful. Externally, one of the things that we realized early on was that we needed to figure out what's going to get the average citizen, and by average I mean the person who has an average amount of information or an average amount of knowledge about the environment, what's going to get them interested in this? Because, we talk about all of the really intricate aspects of forests, but what's going to get people's attention that they're going to think, oh, that's important for me. And so we landed on water, because water supply is really important, and it impacts 31 towns, the aquifer that we all rely on, and but also water mitigation of flooding, and forests and open spaces do that very, very well. They absorb water slowly into the ground rather than having it run off of pavement. So water in terms of incoming water for our personal use, but also management of flooding. Carbon sequestration, we all know, we're seeing every single day on the news, we see more climate disasters. They're happening more frequently, faster than we ever expected. So that's an important piece as well. Biodiversity, Kirsten talked about that. And then we all know the value of open space, even if we haven't really thought of it that way. We'd love to go and see beautiful mountains or lakes or oceans. Real estate values are higher when there's open space around in the neighborhood. So those are kinds of things that we talked about a lot as we went out and did our tabling and spoke to people. We had literally hundreds of individual conversations. Farmers market, Bottle Hill Day, Fish and Whack, Green Morristown, Green Chatham. We just did tons and tons of events, and people were gracious. They were willing to listen, and we had them sign a petition, and it just continued to grow and grow. So individual conversations and also tours of the forest. We did tours of the forest the first year. They were extremely successful, and having somebody point out things to you like, you know, here, this looks like it's a mushroom, and here's what's going on underneath the ground. The mushroom is actually the flower of the fungi. I didn't know that. The underground network is amazing, and then what we see, the manifestation, we think, oh, that's the plant, but it's actually the flower of the plant that's really underground. So there's a lot of really interesting things you learn on the tours. We've hosted educational events for Drew alums, for the public. We've gone out to many other municipalities and talked about the forest. And because of those three things, we've garnered bipartisan support. And we've been very much in alignment with Madison's governing body. The town of Madison, the mayor and the council really want to save this forest. And that is hugely helpful when you're trying to do something like this, because conservation takes time, it takes perseverance, it takes strong will, and something that's willing to go the distance. So being in alignment with your governing body for us has been huge. And then partnerships, I mentioned that we've gone out to other towns. 11 towns and environmental commissions have sent either a resolution of support to our town or a letter of support. And in New Jersey, that's kind of unusual. Usually a governing body of one town doesn't really get involved in another town's concerns. But when we went out and talked to them and talked about the aquifer and the regional value of the forest, we got 11 towns to support us, and that's a pretty big deal. We also have 31 national, state, and local environmental groups that have sent letters as well. And together, the membership of those environmental groups equates to about 100,000 people throughout the state and across the country. So there's huge support for this, and that's also been really important for us to continue to garner those endorsements. So again, diverse skills and experience, understanding how government works, that's been really helpful. Several of us have sat on, I sat on the zoning board of Madison, Chris Hepburn sat on the planning board, and it's been very helpful to understand how government works, because it helps us manage expectations of our supporters. If they're going to come to a meeting and speak, we can let them know this is the time that you're likely to speak, and you have a 3-minute limit. And so we've been able to really understand how that works and then help our supporters help us. And then of course, deep connections and networks within the town and beyond. So I think those are kind of the parts of the secret sauce that we've identified. So that is the end of the slideshow. Happy to answer questions.
Judy, can you talk a little bit about the Davy group, the Davy Environmental Group's
Yes.
environmental analysis of the forest? You know, what that consisted of and what your learnings are, and how do you use that?
Yes. So Davy Resource Group is an environmental consulting firm. They're part of a larger If you all know Davy Tree, you probably see their trucks around. So they're part of a very large organization, but they have an environmental group that we retained to do a study of the forest. And what we asked them to do was, go and better. Go into the forest and give us an evaluation, see what do you see there? Are there environmental constraints that might affect a developer's ability to develop certain parts of the property? We know that there are wetlands, can you give us an evaluation of those? And what they did was they went through and they gave us a report. It's actually on our website, so if you're interested in reading it, it's on our website. And it has a number of different maps. And what the key takeaways were that they felt, the Davy Resource Group felt that the forest had much higher value as an environmental resource than as a real estate asset, if you will. So what we've been able to do is go back to that report time and again and point out features of the property that we were able to, so for example, there are 6 wetlands on the property. Some of them are potentially connected to one another, and if that is the case, then that may mean that they're higher value environmentally. The entire 53 acres is designated by Fish and Wildlife and New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection as habitat for the Indiana bat, which has been on the endangered species list since the 1960s. So the habitat is there, and whether or not the animals are there, the habitat remains viable for those animals, so they could show up at some point down the road. And so those are the features that Davy was able to pull together, and they also recommended to us subsequent studies that we might want to consider as well. It's a great read. The first 9 pages are pretty much a summary, and then there's a lot of charts and a lot of maps and so forth. So it looks like if you print it out, it's a big thick thing, but the gist of it is in about 9 pages or so, and it just talks about the topography of the land, the environmental features of the land, the steep slopes, the mature trees, etc.
And I have heard you all speak about the fact that you are part of a continuum of specialized properties like this with Geralda Farms and Lawanica, that the 3 properties provide synergy to each other. And
So this is directly across from Geralda Farms, the office complex, and adjacent to the Lawanica Brook Reservation, I think it's called, which is along Woodland Avenue. And then it's only 3 or 4 miles from the Great Swamp. So there's a wildlife corridor, essentially, that we recognize as being very important for migrating birds, for example, the bats. We know that there's a colony of the Indiana bats somewhere in the Great Swamp. Nobody knows where they are except Fish and Wildlife, but we know they're there. So it's possible that they may at some point also be in other forested areas. So, yes.
Yeah, so have you or has the town of Madison have direct discussion with your university? I mean, are they considering this? Are they open to this?
The town has been in discussions with them since 2021 about this, and Drew has a new president, by the way. She just started on July 1st, and she says we want to save the forest, but we also, our job is also to save the university. So we hope we can come to an agreement.
Okay,
Yeah, so they are talking.
all right.
Do they have an amount?
Sorry.
Do they have an amount that they're looking at? Or-
Well, we don't, Drew has never told us what their amount is. So we're not part of the negotiations, obviously, of that. We're not privy to that, but I'm guessing they don't agree.
is the borough doing the financial negotiation?
Yes. The borough would potentially purchase the property Or they could, it could be purchased and become part of the Morris County Park System. Since it's close to those other county parks, that makes some sense as well. There's different possibilities. Or a conservation organization could purchase it if they have the funding and just set it aside as permanent open space.
And you probably talked to all of those.
Everybody knows, yeah, about this, yeah. Yes.
Do you find, like, when you're doing outreach and you're going to legislators and stuff, do you find it like that your network and the new people you bring into your network is giving you more outreach, or do you find yourself doing more cold outreach?
Very much a networking process. We just received a donation, unsolicited donation from somebody who we didn't know who this person was, and we only knew her name and the town that she lived in. Well, it turned out that she's a friend of someone in our group, so a friend of a friend, and our volunteer had gone and spoken to the Rotary Club where her friend belonged. And then this friend, the Rotary member, then talked to her friend, and this woman had a passion for conservation, and her family had a passion for it, and she sent us a donation. So that's the kind of stuff that just is, wonderful networking activities. And so it's very unusual, I think, for us to just go cold call. And we usually have some connection or some reason we try to find a reason to, talk to people from a networking perspective. With the different towns, we started with the environmental commissions, because we had an environmental commission member in Madison, and she was able to reach out to her peers in other towns, and that kind of got the ball rolling with some municipalities. Are we getting close to the end?
No, we just wanted to turn one
wanted
off
you
so
to
you're
not
not
be
in the
in the
dark.
Okay, okay.
What are your future plans now? I mean, because you've done all of this networking creation and support. Now, how do you intend to continue sustaining the momentum?
Yeah, so we continue to educate and advocate for the forest. There's always other groups to talk to, so we continue to do that. We might, at some point, have to do some fundraising, serious fundraising. We're not sure if that's gonna be necessary or not. We've just done small fundraising to kind of pay for our paper and our printing costs and such. And a lot depends on what happens, I think, in the next probably year or so. What we ultimately would love to have happen is for the forest to be preserved, and we then become like sort of friends of the Drew Forest Park or whatever it ends up being, and continue to focus on stewardship of it, not so much having to save it, but maybe putting in more deer fencing as an example.
And so in terms with that stewardship, are there ongoing programs to continue monitoring the plantings and the growth of these things?
Yes, the restoration, which started in 2008, is still going on. The university, Chris Hepburn, our person that paid for the deer fencing, she and her husband also fund an intern who works for the entire school year under Sarah Webb's leadership, and they do all kinds of projects in the forest. They get volunteer teams to come out and pull out invasives, and they plant things, and they continue to do that work, because invasive plants tend to come back. You pull them out and you certainly get way ahead of it, but there's always things that float in or that are brought in by birds or things that happen. The deer fencing sometimes gets broken and needs to be repaired. So there is an ongoing stewardship of the restoration of those two areas. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the Arboretum and its relationship to the rest of that forest area? Is that part of Drew to maintain as, something part of the school, or is that
So
to be
we
moved over into the forest? And
We
What
don't-
is it exactly?
Yeah, so the Zuck Arboretum was named after two botany professors from Drew, Florence and Robert Zuck. When they retired, that area of the forest was named in their honor. And they were really well-loved professors there. Once the deer fencing went in, the Zuck Arboretum was part of the 22 acres that was fenced, as well as the Hepburn Woods. And the Zuck Arboretum has two ponds in it, as well as all of these now native restored wildflowers and shrubs and such. So I don't know what Drew's plan is. We've always just assumed that until it's preserved through a conservation sale or a conservation easement, or the university permanently sets it aside, until that happens, we assume that it's at risk. So we want to protect all 53 acres.
It seems to me that, I know Drew needs the money, but if they wanna develop it, there's a lot of things that would stop development. The fact that it's wet, that there are wetlands there, the fact there are endangered species there. I mean, doesn't that factor into their equation about the
So,
value?
two things. First of all, the forest is part of the university as a whole, which is all zoned for university use. So right now, the zoning is a big obstacle for development because the town is not required to rezone it. And so it can be used for university purposes. Let's assume that that's not the case, and you mentioned these environmental constraints. There are wetlands, there are steep slopes. Madison also has a tree ordinance that would have to be figured into the mix. Madison also has a steep slopes ordinance. So there's a lot of, I would say, constraints to simply going in and bulldozing in and putting up, housing. That said,
Yeah.
it's not saved until it is. Yes, Judy.
I think that along Lowentaka Way, there's condos, like the length
Yes.
of that's what, that Geraldo Farms on the other side. So that was at one point Drew University property that they sold
So
years ago.
there's a condo complex called Copper Beach. And it was restricted housing originally for Drew University personnel. And Drew, I think, owned not all of it, but several of the units. And so one of the things that happened is that the borough gave Drew relief on those condos, and gave them relief on this restriction that it had to be only housing for university personnel, which meant that they could then sell them at market value, and they did. They sold, I think they got about $8 million for the units that they owned there. So those condos are already there. They're already obviously developed, and they're kind of right in front of the Zuck Arboretum. And there's nothing that's going to change as far as that goes.
I guess I'm just saying the zoning was kind of,
It was
didn't hold fast, at that point.
So as I said, it was zoned for
Drew use.
university, and the town gave them relief and said, okay, it could just be regular multi-unit housing. And then Drew was able to sell the units that they owned for market value. So that gave them some relief. They also had properties on Woodcliff, which is on the other side of the campus. They own several residential housing. They've sold everything that they could sell was residential in nature.
If the zoning is on board that they wanted to, is the zoning on board that they wanted to like remain a forest, like it not be sold to?
Is
Zoning board.
Is the zoning board on board? Wait,
Oh.
sorry. Wait,
the municipal body, the governing body, the mayor and the council, yes,
So-
they want it to be a forest.
so
They want
then,
to save it.
how is it like at risk?
Well,
What's the risk then?
the risk is that, there's no risk it'll be rezoned, unless some other things happen that have to do with, affordable housing requirements, that the town may end up with a larger affordable housing requirement. So that is a possibility. And what happens sometimes in that scenario is a builder will come and they'll say, well, we'll buy this land and we'll give you 20% or 30% affordable housing, and, you know, you give us relief on the zoning. So that's nothing that's imminent, but there are things that could end up in the courts, and the zoning could be set aside by the courts. So the town is not required to rezone it unless there's some other legal action that requires that.
So in comparison with the part of the university that has all the buildings on it, that, what's the whole size of the university as compared to these 53 acres you're talking about?
It's about 160 acres.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So it's my understanding that a lot of what the controversy was because of the affordable housing aspect. Am I wrong in that? That brought it up into everyone's consciousness. Because when I was mentioning to staff members when we were having this program, everyone said, oh, well, that's safe now. Drew Forest is safe. You know, that's not going to happen. And so it's interesting to me because I know that was a large part. Can you maybe talk about that?
So I
know there's a lot that you probably can't say or can't.
Well, so if you know about affordable housing, it's complicated. So, you know, I could give you an hour presentation on something I knew zero about back in 2021. But what happened was that every municipality in New Jersey has to have an affordable housing plan, and that's an agreement between the municipality and the Fair Share Housing Corporation. And so Madison had an agreement and was supposed to be getting immunity from any other action until 2025, July 2025. So what happened was that was all settled, and then Drew came forward and said, well, wait a minute, we have this 53 acres and it wasn't calculated in Madison's arithmetic when they came up with this agreement, so we want to intervene and we want a judge to hear our case. And so that started in August of 22. It's still going, and it hasn't been decided yet. But the judge did say, and this is probably what you're referring to, the judge in a partial ruling said, look, I'm paraphrasing here, of course, but it's essentially that even if Madison owes more affordable housing, it doesn't have to be built on the Drew Forest. So that gave us, you know, a good feeling of relief, but it's not over, and of course, court cases can go in different directions and you expect them to go, so.
And the other thing is that if a developer gets a bee in their bonnet about developing something, they can use the court to their advantage, and they can use the affordable housing,
The builder's
you know,
remedy comes in.
as
Yeah.
a builder's remedy.
So
It's not safe. It's
until it is.
until it is, right.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about that agreement only being till 2025, look how quickly 2023 disappeared.
Oh, sure, it's not that far away.
Yeah.
It's not that far away. So that's still in the process. And hopefully that would be settled. We hope that that's settled favorably for, you know, all concerned parties. But that's another thing that could happen in the courts that could
Yeah.
change.
So you also said that you've worked with the county commissioners.
Mhm.
Have you worked with the Department of Parks and Recreation? I mean, that's one of the possibilities, but I mean, that would be good to have some people on the administration of the parks in your camp.
Right, so when the open space application goes to a committee, and they review it for completeness, and they ask questions of the applicant, which in this case was the Borough of Madison. And then they make a recommendation to the commissioners, AKA freeholders,
Yeah.
on, you know, these are the applications and we think you should fund these ones, and
Yeah.
that's what their role is. But part of the there is a parks liaison on the commissioners and the
Right.
open space committee, so they are already kind of wrapped into that.
I would say would be also be very, very wise to cultivate a personal relationship with some of the people who are administrators of the Parks Department. Even though there's a liaison, it's good to have some other people in your camp.
Thank you, that's a great idea.
Is Green Acres still alive and well?
Yes.
And so if you got the grant, could that be used as a match for Green Acres?
So the county grant would be decided in the next probably month or so. And then Green Acres just started in, I think, a new round of funding. We just found out about it a couple weeks ago. And my understanding is that entities can apply for Green Acres funding for the same property. So, for example, Friends of Drew Forest could apply for Green Acres dollars for the Drew Forest, but so could League of Women Voters. I mean, you could bring in different groups to apply for money for the same piece of property, which I think is a little bit different than the way that they've done it before. So, but the general answer to the question is yes, Green Acres is still a viable funding source.
I just wanted to make another observation, and
Sure.
that is as part of your presentation, when you were explaining how important it is for people to understand how the town council works and what the political relationship is, a wonderful tie-in between what your organization is doing and what the league is doing.
Yeah.
Because our main function is voter education.
Yes.
We register voters, but our main function is voter education and getting people to understand how the political process really
Yeah,
works.
because
So thank you.
And you know, there's a lot of nuances to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that I had never been to a freeholder commissioner meeting or open space, and so just, you know, why hadn't I thought about county government? I was so
Who's
used to
the
Madison. It's true, and so it has
We'll get away
opened
from
up
that.
that avenue.
Well, I think it's, you know, it's really important to know that and to be able to help other people understand how it works, to your point,
Yeah.
because, you know, and each town might be a little bit different. And then you get into state and it's more complicated, and you get federal and it's way more complicated. So, yeah, it's helping people understand how that all works. We often hear people say things like, and this goes way back, this is not just about the forest, but this happened when I was running Madison Matters, those decisions are all made in the back room, you know, they're all like, or, you know, this happened in my town and nobody said anything about it, didn't even know what was going on. It's like, well, did you look at legal notices to see when the meetings were held?
Yeah.
And, you know, again, people don't know to do that.
Yeah.
So it's very important to help people understand how that all works.
I would also.
Wait,
Sorry.
You can go, my line of questioning is a little different, so you can go.
I'm just going to make one other observation, and that is, you have a relationship with the Great Swamp Association, and the Educational Foundation of the Great Swamp Association is part of the Parks Department.
Excellent.
What's preventing the town from using it as like an eminent domain and just then taking the property, that portion of the property?
It's really hard and really unpopular.
has to be a use too, it has to be like there has to be a use for it from the perspective of the town. They can justify taking it for eminent domain, that's a high bar.
It's unpopular, from many citizens would not like that, so it's hard to do that. Yeah.
You don't make any friends, do you?
Well, if enough people want to save the forest,
Right.
and they're doing it to save the forest instead of have something, then maybe, and then once they
It's a
get
good
it.
thought,
yeah.
it's just,
Really like to see the win-win. That's what we're focused on.
Does anyone want to go to the forest?
I would love to go.
It's a fun walk.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways you can go. On our website, we have a link to the Forest Walk, and it'll give you, it's a QR code, and you can just click there, and it'll tell you exactly where to park, where to enter the Arboretum or the Hepburn Woods. In the spring, we may be offering guided tours again. Right now, it's a little late in the year for that, but we may be offering those again in the spring, and those are really nice because you get really the inside scientific lowdown on what's happening in the forest and what's there, and it's really, really quite interesting.
Do you want to tell everyone about Wednesday night?
Oh, so Wednesday night, the county commissioners will hear the recommendation of the Open Space Committee, the committee that looked at everything and dotted all the i's and crossed the t's. They're gonna make their recommendation to the commissioners at 5 o'clock at 10 Court Street in Morristown. And there's no public comment allowed at the 5 o'clock meeting, but the public can attend. And then there'll be a break until 7 o'clock when the public meeting will be held. There's a veterans event kicking off that part of the meeting, and then there'll be public comment later. So we're planning on being there at 5 to see what the recommendation is from the Open Space Committee, and then based on that, we'll be there at 7 to comment appropriately. If they're funding it fully, we're gonna pop the champagne bottles. If they're not funding it fully, we will try to convince the commissioners that despite the recommendation that their committee made, they should really consider full funding. So that's the plan for Wednesday. Thank you for reminding me. And if anybody's interested in going, there's information on our website about it. Also, if you can't go but you want to have your voice heard, you can send an email to the clerk of the commissioners, and it's on their website. Her name is Deborah Lynch, and as long as you send it 8 hours before the meeting, it'll be read into the public record, so you can have a voice even if you can't be there.
And it's on their website, how to, different ways you can impact.
Yeah.
And if anyone, also on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter, so if you want to stay up to date. We've been emailing a little more than usual because so much with all these meetings has been going on, but generally, we mail periodically, a little bit about the advocacy, but a little bit about the nature, the tiny toads and things like that.
Yeah, so it's a great way to, have your voice heard, especially if you can't come, or you can also watch it remotely. They're both live streamed, so that's also a way to.
We have a member who observes my meeting.
Yeah, so a lot going on this month with a lot of meetings. We've had one week before last, and yeah, so we really appreciate your support and your attention. We can stick around for a couple minutes if anybody has any other questions. We're happy to answer those. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much.
I
It's
want to-
very interesting, very.
I think we all want to thank Carol and Kirsten for the presentation, a very interesting presentation. I can tell you that Helen and Abby Farrell is really proud of you. And would be right there along with you if they could still be around. Anyway, thank you all for coming to this league event. I have an announcement I'd like to make real quickly. The Morristown Environmental Commission is in need of members. If any Morristown residents are interested, they can apply on the town website or talk to Bob Upton, who's sitting in the back, at the end of this event. If you're interested in the environment, that's a great way. You don't have to be an expert to be on the commission, because you can actually learn a lot by being on the commission. And as I think as Kirsten discovered, you learn a lot when you're working, and there's so much to learn. So if you're in Morristown, speak to Bob if you're interested. I want to thank you all again for coming out. You don't need to do a league commercial. I think everyone here knows who the league is and what we do. So thank you again for coming, and thank you again for presenting.
Thank you.